So theoretically, you could be fine, you're lifting, and all of a sudden, bam, it comes out, and oh.
Oh, that looks like a pain in the balls.
What's up, guys? Jeff Cavalier, ATHLEAN-X.com.
And Jesse Lako, ATHLEAN-X.com.
So today we're talking about hernias. And before you say, oh, I never had one, I don't have to worry about one, it's actually one of the more common injuries, especially for those that like to pick things up and put them down. Like our question for today. This is an Ask Jeff video where you get your question featured and I answer it for you. Leave your question below. Maybe you'll appear in a future video like this one.
So we have from Alex, almost 40. Hey Jeff, I just went to the doctor and it turns out I have an inguinal hernia. He said no heavy lifting. Are me and my gains screwed unless I have surgery? Thanks, you're the best. Jesse, you're even bester. You like that one?
Alex, almost, yeah, that sounds like the intelligence level of somebody that would like Jesse, actually.
Oh, that's not very nice.
I like Alex, but I'm just saying the use of the words there. So let's talk about what this is. I can relate exactly what Alex is talking about because I've had not one, but two hernias.
Two hernias?
Two hernias, one of which I had repaired and one of which I live with to this day. So the one I had repaired back in 2011, I had it for 3 years, and at that point, I finally started to get to the point where it's so uncomfortable that I had to go and get it repaired.
Okay.
We'll talk about the options in terms of what repair looks like for those that have to go down that route. The other one that I had was in 2013, and ironically, I was filming an exercise that I recommend you not do, which I'll get into in a second here. And of course, in filming the exercise not to do, I incurred my second hernia. Ironically, the same thing that happened to me the first time that caused a hernia on the first incident of doing that exercise.
Is that why you have me demonstrate all the bad exercises?
That is why Jesse now demonstrates many exercises for me. So what is a hernia, and then basically what causes it? Okay, so I got this right here. So what this is basically your intestines inside and your abdominal muscles on the outside. And what happens is you start to get a little breakdown in the outer abdominal wall. And they're very thin muscles down here. We're talking about inguinal hernias, down in the groin, just to the right or left of your junk. That's a weak spot. And a lot of times we are born with this weak spot that never actually fully closes. If we get any type of increase of intra-abdominal pressure, if we cough, if we sneeze, if we lift heavy, if we bear down and we push out, that can cause the inside to start pushing out against the outside. And if we keep doing that, what happens is you'll get this sort of gradual breakdown in the area. It's not an incident that happens just like that. The actual tear you could feel as a one-off incident, but it was an accumulation of a lot of things that led up to it. So if you look at this band here, it looks like it's fine, it's intact, it can actually function. But if I were to pull it and show you a little bit closer here, you can see that there's a tear in that band, okay? So that tear over time is going to eventually wind up breaking and snapping the band. You'll feel the zipper-like pain when that actually happens, but it's an accumulation of those stresses, the increased IAP pushing against that leads to that eventual breakdown. So in my case, I actually felt this zipper-like pain the moment I did that rep, but it was probably an accumulation of a gradual weakening of that tissue in that area over time.
Right.
Very similar to when I talked about the pec tear that happens, we covered a few videos back. Though the pec tear will happen on a single repetition, it was the accumulation of the breakdown of the tissue over time that led to that weakening in that spot that allowed it to break. So who does it affect? 25% of the time, men will have this happen to them in their lifetime.
Jesus.
That's a lot of inguinal hernias. It's actually one of the most popular repairs that we have surgically done every year.
Really?
Women actually get it about 3% of the time.
That's it?
But it's still a lot. 3 out of every 100 women is still, a lot. It's the fact that men are sort of predisposed by carrying a little extra anatomy down in that area. Unless you're Jesse, you don't have to worry about that as much.
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
I'm just saying. That's why, listen. So if you were to get one, what happens? Okay, so you've got two options always when you get a hernia. Number one, watchful waiting or surgical repair. Now, let's go down the surgical repair because, again, I did that. You have two options in terms of surgical repair, and one of them is really not even that much of an option anymore, and it's the tension-free or the tension repair. And what they do with the tension repair is they actually suture the tissue, the hole in that outer abdominal wall, together. But what's not so good about that is you're basically holding it together with stitches so that if I were to increase the pressure on the abdominal wall from the inside out,
then it causes the sutures to open up.
yeah, it's gonna pop that hole again. So you get to really be careful about the type of pressure you're developing from the inside out. However, they came out with the mesh repair, and the mesh repair actually goes behind the hole. So if this is the hole here, I put the mesh behind the hole like this from the inside out. So the hole is actually never repaired. And what I do is I make sure the mesh is large enough to cover that hole. So even if the hole starts to get a little bit gradually bigger over time, they're still being covered by the mesh, and it doesn't increase, there's no tension on that repair.
Right.
I'm holding this in place, so actually if I were to increase abdominal pressure from the inside out, I'm pushing the repair more into the abdominal wall and actually causing more stability of the repair as opposed to less. So that would be the way you'd go, and that's how I went. And again, I haven't had any issues with that repair now for 10 years. So that's a good thing. Now, we've got the other route, watchful waiting. You can train with a hernia.
Can you?
Yes, contrary to what people say, you have to just be careful that you do two things. Number one, I've now trained with my hernia for 8 years. You have to be careful about the use of exercises that dramatically increase intra-abdominal pressure. We'll talk about that in a second. You also have to be careful not to utilize exercises that increase that inguinal vulnerability, I like to say. And let's start with that one, because that's the one I've covered before in videos, and I mentioned earlier here. We're talking about like a one-arm row. Again, the tissues in this area of the groin are already thin and rather weak, and sometimes already compromised genetically by the fact that that inguinal canal never fully closed. So as you start to put yourself in a position like a one-arm row with one leg up, one leg down on the bench, you've already got a lot of stress and tension in that area, especially for the leg that's down on the ground, okay? That's causing that stretch at the same time. And then you go and you lift a heavy weight, awkwardly oftentimes, that causes that area that's already under tension, that potentially could have already had a little bit of that breakdown, to just simply open the hole large enough for the insides to herniate out. Now, if that were to happen, by the way, what I've had to do, I know it sounds kind of graphic, but I got to lay down on the ground, I see the bulge coming out, and I got to push it back down, okay?
Whoa.
Yeah, and put it like back in. Because the worst thing that can happen is, if you train with this, and it comes out to the point where it gets stuck out of the hole. So it's out here and I can't get it back in. That's called an incarcerated hernia. And basically, if it stays out there or even twists when it's out there, it can get strangulated. And at that point, if it cuts off blood supply, that tissue can necrose and die. And at that point, we could get some kind of a sepsis, and that'd be a very, very ugly, dangerous situation. So they always recommend, that's when people tell you, hey, I think it's better off that you go and get it repaired. Especially if you're younger and healthier, it's going to be easier to overcome the repair. But again, I think that you may not have to rush it as often, because a lot of times they don't become strangulated. That's a risk that you play with, and I've been playing with one now for 8 years. So the other thing we want to do, though, is talk about the intra-abdominal pressure exercises. So squats, deadlift, right? These are the exercises that are going to require a lot of bracing, pushing from the inside out. That is going to push all of your abdominal contents sort of into the wall against it, the bracing of the wall from the inside out, which increases stability of the spine and increases core rigidity. But again, at the same time, if you've got a hernia there, you are asking to push the contents further out. So one of the things you can do is decrease the weight a little bit, right? Or you can just simply utilize a belt in that case. So I'm not often a fan of utilizing belts, but especially in instances here where people are dealing with unrepaired hernias, the belt at least gives your abdominal cavity something to stabilize and push into. So when the intra-abdominal pressure increases, it pushes up against the belt, which helps to keep the contents in where we want them to stay, inside. The other thing is you can use alternative bracing techniques, just by utilizing different ways of breathing and stabilizing the torso. But the fact is, you're going to want to make some sort of an adaptation there to decrease the risk of increasing intra-abdominal pressure to degrees that can actually push this thing out and cause the hole potentially to even get larger. All right, so are you screwed? No, Alex, you can actually still train. Like I said, just be mindful of those incidents where you feel it. And you're going to feel it. You're going to feel that sometimes as you do this, you can feel sort of a bulging or the pressure in that spot, and you might even be able to visually see it. And in those cases, you're going to want to lay down, like I said, let gravity do the work for you and help to push it back in. The last thing I'll say is if you went down the surgical route, how fast can you get back into stuff? I mean, I was a sick bastard that was down on the floor doing abdominal isometric exercises the night of my surgery.
That's because you're a mutant.
I was down there trying to do some additional, like just isometric contraction, because I wanted to just waken the muscles up there, knowing I wasn't going to be pushing on the repair and damaging the repair, and because I had it done laparoscopically, I wasn't really too disturbed. I was definitely in pain, but I wasn't too disturbed because I didn't have to cut through a lot of muscles to get there. So your return to activity is best advised by your doctor what to do. But again, they can oftentimes be a little conservative, right? Because they don't want to screw up their work. But when you do a laparoscopic repair, with that mesh on the inside, there really is not that much you can do to damage it, but your pain levels can be a little uncomfortable. You have to work around that.
Right.
But you're definitely going to have the fastest recovery that way. So I will say this, Alex, regardless of what direction you decide to go in, if you go to the watchful waiting route, about 23% of the people wind up crossing over within 5 years to actually need surgery. But that leaves a lot of people who don't have to cross over. So you could train for a long period of time without having to worry about getting this thing fixed.
Just like you.
Just like me. And fingers crossed, because I don't want to jinx myself. So that being said, guys, I hope you found the video helpful. Remember, if you want your Ask Jeff question answered in a future video, make sure you leave your question in a comment below, and I'll do my best to get those to you. In the meantime, if you're looking for smart training where we don't utilize exercises that place you in a vulnerable position like that, we kind of have a mindful approach to how we train. All of our exercises and plans and programs are laid out over at ATHLEAN-X.com, step by step. And also click subscribe, turn on notifications so you never miss a new video when we put one out. All right, guys, see you soon.